I want to thank everybody for coming today. We're very proud here in the Ozarks Room at Missouri State University to have an ongoing series of author talks. I've said it online, so it must be true that we are in a golden age of books about the Ozarks. Just a lot of good books coming out about the Ozarks, fiction and nonfiction. So our special guest today is Todd Parnell, who he told me now has double digits in terms of his published books, 10 books and counting. So he's a prolific author. He comes from a long line of Ozarkers, 8 generations. So I know there's at least one other person in the room that claims to have 8th generation Ozarker, to be an 8th generation Ozarker. So maybe we could have some kind of wrestling match or something, grudge match. Scotch-Irish descent. I think you've come from a banking family because Parnells and Branson go hand in glove. He's the former president, one of the former presidents of Drury University. And if you've never read a Todd Parnell novel, and you're thinking, he comes from a banking family and is a former university president, it must be the most boring esoteric novels. You are in for a surprise and a treat because one of the reviews I wrote for one of your novels, I think I made the observation that about every 5 pages on average, there's either some sort of a violent death or some sort of sexual interaction of some sort. And they kind of go back and forth. So, I was thinking, well, it worked for Willie Shakespeare and Romeo and Juliet. It worked for them, violence and sex. And it works for Todd in the 21st century. So I better stop there, and please join me in welcoming Todd Parnell.
Thank you. If you were trying to sell books, I'm not so sure you helped us right there. Tom asked me to talk a little bit about the 2 most recent ones I've had to release, Cure and the Posse, and they were written in the heart of the pandemic. So what does an old retired banker educator have to do but sit around and dream up crazy stories and put them on paper? And the publisher I used went ahead and published them. Couldn't have a book signing. This is the first formal book signing I've had since before the pandemic began. So I'm honored that you all are here today. I'm particularly honored that I'm being allowed to sit in this chair, stand in this place, following in the heels of such academic powers as Dr. Brooks Blevins, Alex Prim. These guys wrote scholarly works that are, really documented well, and they are historical in nature. And I'm a wannabe writer. Fiction? Are you kidding me? What am I doing in the same place as these guys? Well, I'm here because I have fun writing, and that's why I do it. And I think before I speak about the 2 books, I want to just tell you a little bit about how I got to here from there, wherever there is, in terms of writing. I can remember very well the very first writing I ever did. It was in on August 23rd, 1991, 2 days after my daughter was born. And the significance of that is that I was a 44-year-old father of 3 boys. My wife was convinced we would never have any more children again, and she was so flip about it, she put a napkin under my knife and fork to announce that we were going to have another child. She was 43, and so we were convinced we had another boy coming. So the names we came up with were boys. And it fit because my grandfather's family had 14 boys and 2 girls, so we were following the pattern. Unbelievably, we had a little girl, and I've never felt such an emotional need to express myself. And Mike Royko, I think, was his name. Mike, is that a name that Chicago Tribune? Yeah. He was writing a journal about the birth of his son, and so I took his lead. And I started writing down every day about what my new daughter was doing. I didn't do that for my boys, so they still hold that against me. And, each day became a week, became a month, became a year, became 21 years. And the first piece that I ever really started and finished, or it took me 21 years to do it, I gave to my daughter on her 21st birthday. One chapter for each year of her life. And that's when it convinced me that I really enjoyed writing. Now, writing has always been fun for me, with a few rare exceptions. Leon Combs was supposed to be here today, and his friend got sick and they had to go to a doctor. But Leon was the one that really got me started writing in terms of thinking of being published. And I had the privilege when I was a banker of floating the whole Buffalo River with my 13-year-old son, Benjamin, who was a lousy student in the middle part of middle school. And we held this out to him to help him improve. We said we would stand up and fight to get you the last 2 weeks of school to float the entire Buffalo River if you start being a B student. Well, he loved the outdoors, so immediately became a B student. And so I wrote down the trip, you know, the 12 days and 11 nights. I kept a track of it because I wanted it for he and I to have. I had no vision beyond that. And Leon got wind of it and wanted to read it. Leon's an author himself, as you know. And he said, Todd, this is a great father-son story. We got to get this published. I've got the editor that can help you. I said, okay, you know, furthest thing from my mind. So I took my manuscript, shipped it off of this editor. A month later, you know, with shaking hands, I opened it up, and it's my manuscript. It's just got red ink all over it, and it's got a 4-page letter, which I want to share pieces from you. And that I continued writing after this is a bloomin' miracle. Dear Todd, and this would be the kindest thing he would say in all of that. Given that you intend to self-publish this book, I strongly recommend that you give it a major overhaul before you go to press, or you will have a basement full of copies. You have major factual errors, and he proceeded to point out all the things I got wrong. You have probable factual errors, and he proceeded to point those out. And then the one that really hurt, errors of omission. He's criticizing me for things I didn't even do. And then descriptions. In general, your descriptions of the natural beauty of the river are less than powerful. You need to take some time off and go to the Buffalo. Well, hell, I just spent 12 days and 11 nights on the Buffalo. I bet that's more than he ever spent. What's that one? Yeah, you can see it. The inept angle. He said, you report numerous episodes where you seem to be a total novice on a camp out or a canoe, endangering your young son by miscalculating the length of the trip, having tents blow away, camping on an island during a flood. My concern is that some city slicker from Dallas is going to read your book, imitate your technique, and seriously injure himself. So, what's the salvage? Don't mistake these heavy criticisms for outright condemnation of the book. Trust me when I say I'm on your side. Nonetheless, the book did get published by the University of Missouri Press. Several others followed that were, Leon helped me with them, and we tried to raise some money for some charities like the Skaggs Foundation in Branson. And, you know, I just enjoyed it. The next chapter of my writing begins when I retire as president from Drury. And I asked Betty, we're going to go on a vacation to Hawaii, and let's go. It's been a wonderful time, but we're exhausted. We're going to go there and recover. And I'll never forget standing at the airport. It was the old Springfield airport, and saying, Betty, I really enjoyed writing. What can I write about next? And she looked at me and she said, for God's sake, Todd, don't write any more about your family. Everybody's sick of those stories. When I removed the knife from my back, I said, what do you want me to write? And she said, write fiction. And I said, well, how am I going to write fiction? I was raised to tell the truth. And she didn't get it. She said, it's easy. You make it a mystery. You put some brutal murders up front. you add some corruption, some politics, some sex, even some supernatural, and you just let it rip. And so we were in Hawaii the next morning at 4 o'clock in the morning. I wake up and I get my little laptop out and I write the word Skunk Creek, which is the name of my first novel. I have no idea where it came from. I had no characters. I had no plot. I had no idea where this was going to go. But I followed her formula, and 10 books and 4 manuscripts that are waiting to be published later, you know, I've really still had fun doing it. Now, in addition to Betty's formula, I kind of have some constants that will flow through all of them, including the 2 I'll talk a little bit about in a minute, Cure and the Posse. All of them are set in the Ozarks. That's a given. All of them involve small towns. I grew up in a small town, Branson, and just have a great love and respect for the way small towns used to be, and some still are. All of them are set around some of the beautiful waters we have here in the Ozarks. We have rare waters here. Anybody that's ever traveled anyplace else knows you don't get clear, clean, plentiful water other places that you get here in the Ozarks. So I write about that. And then I write about the threats to them, the threats to the small towns, the threats to the waters, and how the good guys battle the bad guys to keep them from being destroyed. And I always have a love story. I got to have a love story because my life's been a love story. And it's always ends up with the female being the heroine of the story for some reason. That's just the way it works. And then I usually have a float trip. So just throw that in for good measure. So that's my format for writing 10 books. Betty's formula, which is a little more graphic than mine, but put them together and you got a formula that I've used all the way. The Posse and Cure are no different. The Posse, I think, probably, it's about an international, multinational plot to take over production of all the protein in the world and control the production of it, the sale of it, the pricing of it, and do it at whatever cost it takes to do it to whatever environment, which ultimately trickles down to the Ozarks and the creation of some CAFOs here. Does everybody know what a CAFO is? Confined animal feeding operation, where you stick as many animals in a small place as you can, and you let their waste settle down, and you put it in a big lagoon, and you spray it on the fields, and it goes into everybody's backyard. That's a CAFO. So that is kind of what filtered down. It was inspired by the 10 years I spent on the Missouri Clean Water Commission, 2.5 as chairman. And I watched the serious degradation of the protections of our water during that time go down. It started in 2013 when the Chinese bought Smithfield Foods, and when I say we, the legislature voted to allow foreign ownership of farming lands in Missouri, and that includes the Ozarks. 2014 was the Right to Farm Amendment, and that was billed as an attempt to protect small farmers. Absolutely the opposite. It protects large corporate farmers, not the small ones. It just makes the small ones vessels of the corporate production line. And then 2015, I think I was chairman then, we turned down 2 CAFOs. One was in Goodwin, Missouri, down south, a small town, a chicken CAFO, and the other one was in Trenton, I believe. And as we turned it down on the basis that they did not do the proper construction planning for their CAFOs. Well, the legislature eliminated the construction as a requirement for being approved. And in 2016, we turned down another one, and the legislature promptly eliminated the rule that required that you have 4 of the commissioners be independent and not affiliated with any industry. And 3 could be affiliated with agriculture or mining or whatever. They eliminated that. And then the next year, the 3 of us that had consistently voted against CAFOs got fired, and we were replaced by 3 agricultural interests. And 2 years later, 2019, the legislature passed the Senate Bill 391, which basically eliminated any local control that existed, like county health departments, anything that put a stricter limit on CAFOs than the state did. So the state dumbs theirs down, they eliminate local, we're at the lowest common denominator. And it has always worried me that this is going to lead to what happened in Iowa or North Carolina. In 1990, Iowa had 800 CAFOs. Pig CAFOs, like 5,000 pigs to 10,000 pigs. They had 800 of them. Today, Iowa has 5,000 of them and 750 impaired streams. North Carolina was the same until the hurricane, I can't remember which hurricane it was, came in and dumped all the waste pools into rivers, and so that allowed them to tighten their laws. And I just see it happening with our legislature wanting to become an agricultural power at the expense of our waters. And starting in the north, it'll work its way down to the Ozarks. So anyway, that's why I wrote that book. That's a long-winded discussion. I was inspired to write it. And I'm inspired to stand up against corporate ag, because I think they're the bad guy in terms of the future of our water supply. Anyway, interrupt me, anybody that wants to. This is really informal, so don't stand on any kind of formality. So that was the Posse, and the Posse are the small group of locals that live in the Mark Twain forest that stand up to fight these guys and try to protect the waters. The other one, Cure, was written, again, I've already lashed out at big corporate ag. This is lashing out at corporate pharma, big pharma. And anybody ever been to Crane Creek? One of the most beautiful places in the world, one of the most unusual places in the world. It has one of the few spawning of McCloud trout. Is a trout native to California. They were dumped there in the 1870s, and they spawn naturally. And so they reproduce, and have reproduced since the 1870s. So that's an incredible thing about it. And then the other thing they have that I found out personally, my son Ben, who I talked about earlier, got his master's at MSU, and he did his research down on Crane Creek. And you know, when you think of cottonmouth snakes and water moccasins, you think slow, hot, swampy water. They love Crane Creek, and they grow to enormous size. And I've got this picture of him holding this 5-foot-long cottonmouth that just sends shivers up my spine. He said they're all over the place down there because the food is so plentiful. So anyway, Crane Creek is an unusual place. And I'm sitting around in the middle of the coronavirus, and I'm thinking, wow, why not? What makes Crane Creek unusual? And this is where my brother, Patrick Parnell, came in. He's a veterinarian, retired, has a lot of science, and he said, Todd, you know, there was a meteor shower 1 million years ago that could have impacted the waters of Crane Creek and made them a touch colder or a touch something else. And so he wrote that whole part of the book, and he explains why. In the end, Crane Creek is the cure for the coronavirus. And they find that out when a guy living next to Crane Creek takes his sick wife down. Her last wish, I want to die in the creek, takes her down, and 30 minutes later she's cured. And then it becomes a race for the locals to try to get this product to people who need it and not charge them for it, versus Big Pharma, who's trying to slow it down and make money over it. So that's the general theme of that book. And as you can see, like I told you at the beginning, you sit around, an old banker, educator, bored during the virus, you can't go out, you can't do anything, so make all this stuff up, which is what I did. And I would be remiss if I don't do one more thing about this book. And then there's one other book I want to talk about. You buy this book, you get 2 things for the price of 1. You get my wife's lovely artwork on the cover. This one is a 4x6 that hangs in our house. It's called Humanity. And what could be more appropriate for dealing with the coronavirus than a painting of humanity? This is called Politics. So same general message. So there, my dear, your plug is complete. Now, I snuck one more in on Tom. He didn't give me permission on this one, but I had to because I released this one just before the pandemic started, so I never really got a book signing on it. But it's called Pig Farm, and it's it's a spoof on what happened on the Buffalo River. And for those of you who don't know, in 2012, you wake up and America's first national river, which celebrates its 50th anniversary this year, has a 6,500 pig CAFO on Big Creek, 3 miles from the mouth. How it happened, nobody could tell anybody. It was political all the way. It got approved, kind of like the way Missouri does things. And it was set up to be a functioning pig CAFO. Cargill was the power behind it. And it only took about 5 years for it to land, hi Steve, for it to land the buffalo on the list of America's most endangered rivers. And it was number 9 by the time the governor managed to buy out the owners and get it shut down. And so I wrote a spoof on that going back several hundred years to when my family was on the buffalo and started our lineage there, and tried to really use as much historical data that comes from my family lore as anything else. So that's what this one's about. This one's not by Betty. She doesn't do pigs. This is by another young artist named Amber Hansen, who does very provocative art. So that's part of it as well. So those are the 3 books that we're offering today. If nothing else, I hope we can help the Ozarks Studies Institute make some money off of this. And we got a special deal today. You make a donation to the Studies Institute, and you get 1 donation of $20. You make a donation of $40, you get 2. Donation of $50, 3. So there. So that's all I have to say. Aren't you glad you came?
Yeah. What am I going to do with this beer I brought?
I would very much love to entertain discussion or questions or anything else. Any thoughts anybody has? Alex?
Let me ask, what most influences you about the Ozarks? You've had a career in finance. Have you ever thought of living elsewhere? Why stay here?
That's a provocative question. What interests me most about the Ozarks is the water, because it's different than any place in the world I've ever been, with the exception of New Zealand. And as I told my wife, if I ever had to leave New Zealand, I wouldn't leave my roots, but if I ever had to leave the Ozarks, it would go to New Zealand for the very same reason. They have an incredible resource of water, they've protected it, and it's just all over the place. So water. Water's the answer, and no, we would not. I wouldn't. You aren't going to, are you? She really loved New Zealand, I tell you. Good question. Anybody else?
In terms of environmental issues in Missouri, what stage of alert should we be on? Are things getting better, or
They're definitely not getting better.
things are getting worse?
Yes. Because of the change in the regulatory atmosphere regarding agriculture, our legislators seem to think that we should have an economy that's based on corporate agriculture like Iowa and North Carolina, and need to be working toward that. And to do that, you gotta slow down your rules. You gotta not regulate as much. And that's what they've done. They've dumbed down the regulations to a very low level, and they've eliminated a local control, so you can't have a health commission. There's a really interesting case going on right now. It's still going, even after the ruling in 2019, but it involves Cedar County, and it involves, they had a health committee that set their boundaries different than what the state had, and this lawsuit removes their ability to do that. And I went to the city council. This is the only time I've been to city council, and I begged them to write a memo of support for their lawsuit, because Cedar County sued the state, and it's now at the Missouri Supreme Court to protect their ability to do locally what they needed to, and local control. That's a major issue, and it just really troubles me that if you take out that layer of control, the state is not controlling it. And guess what? What's our water supply? Cedar County, Stockton Lake. That's what our water supply is. I was really disappointed that the city voted 5-4 to not write a memo of support. So I guess my answer is I'm concerned, and I will be. I watch it closely.
Are you hopeful about the Supreme Court case?
It's dragged out for 3 years, so it's not dead, and I don't know what to think, Steve. They've tried to get it dismissed. It's not been dismissed. We tried to get them dismissed, and Steve Jeffries is the attorney. He's from St. Louis. He does a lot of environmental work, and he continues to believe it can be won.
And arguments have already made before the Supreme Court? It's just a matter of...
No, the final arguments of the Supreme Court have not been made.
Okay.
Mike?
Obviously, you had some pushback when you were on the Clean Water Commission, but as an author, have you gotten any pushback or rebuttal from the industries that you are critical of in your fiction?
Well, I haven't had enough sales to know. No, I haven't.
They're just ignoring you?
I would love to have them buy it. Yes.
I'm curious, since you talked about the CAFOs, how many CAFOs do we have? You didn't say how many are here.
Yeah, I didn't say that, did it? 500 was at
Oh, we have 500?
yeah.
I missed that.
Yeah, and that's 5,000 to 10,000 pigs. It's, I think, 30,000 to 40,000 chickens, and I can't remember how many cattle. But it's less than what Iowa had in 1990.
That's good.
Yeah, it is. But and one has been defeated in northern Missouri just in the past year, and it was done by a grassroots group. And I can't remember the name of it, but it was a big victory, and the company pulled out. Yeah.
So I have had the pleasure to see your extensive Ozarks nonfiction library in your home. And
I don't read that stuff. Nonfiction?
Nonfiction. But I know that you do a lot of research when it comes to writing about the Ozarks, even when it's fiction. So I was just curious how much research went into the writing of the 3 books that you have today.
You know, it's more seat of the pants. I wish the Crane Creek mysticism, my brother did that part, and the rest of it I just made up as we went along. And the other one, I did a little bit of research on that, but it's more storytelling than it is Alex's stuff. That's recording storytelling. Yeah, Craig.
Follow up on that question. Do you read any other authors who write fiction that concerns environmental issues?
Well, I wish Brooks was here, because Brooks is one of my heroes, and he was my advisor when I got my master's in history at MSU, and he introduced me to my favorite author. Donald Harrington is his name. Architecture of the Arkansas Ozarks is by far and away the funniest book I've ever read in my life. And he actually has accused me of plagiarism, because his village of choice was Staymore, and the residents were Staymorons. And my village of choice was Hardleyville, and my residents were Hardleyvillans. So that was in the 2 trilogies that I did. He does some environmental referencing, but I think what I love more about his is just it's embedded in the Ozarks. It's fable and fiction and fact and funny. 4 Fs. Do you like him?
Oh, yeah, he's hilarious.
He is.
So how many books do you have in you?
Well, I don't know.
Are you working on anything right now?
I am.
What have you done for us lately?
Well, I've got these 4 manuscripts that have been completed, and I'm going to submit.
4?
Yeah, they're ready to go, and so I'm going to submit one here in the next couple of months once I get through trying to get rid of these. My closet's full.
Got 2 pages.
The one I'm working on now is pretty crazy, but it presumes that the coronavirus impacts males by removing their ability to reproduce male offspring. That it kills the X chromosome. I think it's the X chromosome. And since more males were stubborn about getting the vaccine and about really protecting themselves, more males are impacted. And if you look over time, the population of the United States shifts dramatically toward females. To where I'm writing right now, it's 70% female. And so all of a sudden, females are going to be in charge. And I'm still figuring out where that goes.
What do you mean gonna be?
I know. She's my consultant on that one. I also wrote one that will never get published, but I did it more for fun than anything else. We traveled in Greece. Drury had a campus at Aegina, very small island that was really closely knit, and it was beautiful. We loved it there. And they had a temple to the goddess. What was her? Do you remember what her name was? I can't remember what her name was. But the fable was that she escaped King Midas's advances by becoming invisible and diving in the ocean and swimming to the island. And there she took care of the inhabitants of the island. So they built a beautiful temple to her. Aphia, Queen Aphia was her name. So I translated that fable, just intrigued me. I translated it to Branson. And it's called The Oracle of the Ozarks. And there's an Aphia type girl who had deep roots with the Oracle, and she swims down the Buffalo River and up the White River, and she keeps the White River from being dammed. So there's no dams on the White River, protected the White River. And she ultimately becomes mayor of Branson. I don't think anybody's going to want to read this one. Maybe Caitlin will. No, to answer your question, if I'm not writing, I'm not having fun.
Yeah. So, stock question for authors. Like, what are your writing habits? Do you write first thing in the morning? Do you write when the spirit moves you? Do you shoot for a certain number of words a day?
Well, when I was writing and producing a lot of this stuff, I was doing every morning, and I was trying to get 1,000 words a day. That was kind of my guideline. And this spring, that daughter I talked to you about got married, so that was another amazing adventure for us. And then we had some other things that we've been doing. So I really haven't had a schedule for about 3 months, and I'm anxious to get back on it.
Do you write on a computer? Do you write on a tablet?
Computer.
He's pretty techie.
You're helping me with that. You're helping me with that. I know how to create folders and move things into them. I really appreciate what MSU has done in terms of the Ozarks, what you've done here, and really, with water quality. MSU has been very progressive in that regard, and it's real important because it's a message that people need to graduate from here and take with them. My son did, I know that, and so I'm grateful to MSU for that.
Yeah, I remember studying about the endangerment of the hellbender here when I was a student.
Yeah. Well, that's what my trilogy's about, the Hellbender.
Oh,
It's reintroduced into Skunk Creek.
all right.
Better get one.
I should know that.
Anybody else? You've been very patient. Got a few to sell. We're trying to raise money for the Institute. So anybody wants to make a donation to the Institute, I'll give you a book.
And we do have cookies and coffee, and that's Caney Creek water over there, right there.
Crane Creek. Crane Creek.
It's Crane Creek, yeah.
So it's good for you, right?
Yeah. Cures what ails you.
Yeah.
Well, thanks very much again. Thanks.
I do have one more story I got to tell you. I was talking to somebody about this just a minute ago. You were asking me about the 95-year-old guy down at
Yeah, High Lambeth.
High Lambeth in Bradleyville. And I was having trouble with an arthritic hip. And so I was talking to my friend Leon about it and you about it. And they said, High, who's 95, plows his own garden. He rides a mower, he does everything. And he had arthritis and he got rid of it. And Leon said he asked him what the cure was for it. And he said, well, every night I take 9 golden raisins, I soak them in gin, and I eat it. I tried it for a month, it didn't work. You'll investigate that, Mr. Answer Man. Anyway, that's it. Thank you all for coming out.